Every painting project has a beginning, and for us at Deep Paintings, this three-bedroom bungalow project started long before the paint touched the wall. It started with planning, choosing the right material, and making sure we had everything needed to achieve the kind of painting and finishing we wanted. The first step was going out to purchase the chemicals for the paint production. At the shop, the material were carefully measured. The acrylic, the titanium, calcium, nitroso, and other chemical needed for the production. This thing may look simple, but it's actually very important because at Deep Paintings, we believe that a good finishing starts with good material and proper preparation. For this project, we wanted to have control over the quality, consistency, and colors of the paint we will be using. So we decided to produce the paint ourselves. We already had the clear picture of the color combination we wanted for the house. We needed white for the ceiling, off-white for the wall, dove gray for the passage, and satin paint for the sitting room. So as the chemical were being packed, being measured, the transformation of this three-bedroom bungalow has already started. Not with a brush, not with a roller, but with the preparation of the material that would eventually give us the finishing we wanted. Once everything was purchased and ready, we moved the material to the site where the re-preparation work began. After bringing the material to the site, the next stage was surface preparation, and this is one stage we did not want to rush. The walls had already been screeded, but before applying any paint, we needed to make sure that the surface were properly smooth and ready for finishing. So we started by sandpapering the walls. The purpose was to remove rough edges, level out imperfection, and create a smoother surface for the paint to sit properly. As we walked, we checked the walls carefully and corrected any area that still needed attention. Then we moved to the ceiling. For the ceiling, we decided to rescreed the area that we are not smooth enough. Since part of the house, especially the sitting room, was going to have a satin finish, the ceiling needed to be properly prepared. Satin has a way of exposing surface imperfection, so if the screeding is not smooth, the result will show it. That is why we took our time to rescreed the ceiling and make the surface as even as possible. After the screeding, we allowed it to set properly before continuing with the next stage of preparation. At Deep Paintings, we believe that the quality of the final finish depends greatly on the work you do before the paint is applied. A beautiful paint is not just about the color you choose, it is also about the surface underneath it. So before the roller, brushes, and the colors came in, we made sure the walls and ceiling were properly prepared for the transformation ahead. Production. This was the point where the raw material we had purchased earlier began to come together. For this three-bedroom bungalow, we were producing different types and colors of paint for different parts of the house, so everything had to be properly planned. We started with the paint for the sitting room. For the ceiling, we produced satin white. For the walls, we produced off-white satin. Because the sitting room was going to carry a more refined finish, we wanted the color combination to remain simple, clean, and elegant. After that, we moved to the emulsion paint for the bedroom and other area. In total, we produced 7 buckets of emulsion. 3 buckets were white, mainly for the ceiling. 4 buckets were off-white for the walls in the room. Then we produced an additional bucket of dove gray for the passage. Because the passage was designed to carry a combination of off-white and dove gray. During the production process, every stage had to be carefully handled. The material had to be mixed properly, the consistency had to be right, the colors had to be checked, and we also had to make sure that what we were producing would give us the kind of coverage and finishing we wanted on the wall. This is the part of painting that many people do not usually get to see. They see the finished wall, but they do not always see what goes into producing the paint before it gets there. For us at Deep Paintings, producing the paint ourselves gave us more control over the quality, the color, and the quantity required for the project. Once the production was completed, everything came out exactly as planned. The satin was ready, the white emulsion was ready, the off-white was also ready, and the dove gray was also ready. At that point, the project was no longer just about preparation. We now had the paint ready, the surfaces being prepared, and the transformation was gradually taking shape. Before we started the actual painting, there was one very important stage we had to complete first: maxing and protection. This is the kind of stage that may not look dramatic on camera, but it makes a huge difference in the final finishing. We needed to protect every area that was not supposed to receive paint, so we carefully masked the electrical sockets, switches, doors, windows, ceiling light, wall light, and other fittings around the house. The idea was simple: protect first, then paint, because no matter how good your color is, if paint gets all over the fittings, sockets, lights, or window edges, the final work will look rough. At Deep Paintings, neatness is a major part of the finishing, so we took our time to apply masking tape around the corners and edges, making sure the sensitive area were properly covered before any roller or brush touched the wall. We also checked the work area again to make sure nothing important was left out or left exposed. Once the masking was completed, the room were properly prepared for painting. The surface were ready, the paint was ready, and the fitting were protected. At this point, we could finally begin applying the paint and start seeing the transformation of the bungalow come to life. With the maxing completed and everything properly protected, it was finally time to begin the actual painting. We started with the 3-bedroom. First, we painted the ceiling with the white emulsion we had produced earlier. As the paint went on, the difference was immediately noticeable. The ceiling became brighter, cleaner, and more sharper. And while painting, we continued to inspect the surface carefully. Any small screening imperfection or rough area that became visible was corrected before we continued with the finishing. Because for us at Deep Paintings, it is not just about applying paint. It is about paying attention to the little details that determine how the finished work will eventually look. Once the ceiling were properly done, we moved down to the walls. The walls of the 3-bedroom were painted in our off-white emulsion. We started with the cutting in around the ceiling lines, corners, edges, doors, windows, and other areas where the roller could not reach properly. After the cutting in, we rolled the larger wall surface. Gradually, the room started taking on a completely different appearance. The combination of the sharp white ceiling and the off-white wall gave the bedroom a clean, simple, and refreshing finish. From there, we moved to the passage. For the passage, we were working with 2 colors, off-white and dove gray. We carefully applied the colors according to the design we had planned. And once the dove gray came together with the off-white, the passage immediately developed its own character. The contrast was simple, but it made a big difference. We also completed the necessary ceiling painting in the passage and other adjusting areas, including the kitchen, the toilet ceilings. At this point, you could already see the transformation taking shape across the house. The bedroom we were taken from, the passage had its own color combination, the ceiling were looking sharp, and the space were beginning to feel completely different from where we started. But one major area was still left out: the sitting room. And because we were using satin there, that part of the project required a different level of preparation and finishing. Now we move to the most important part of the entire project, the sitting room. Because we are using satin paint here, the preparation had to be more detailed. Before we started anything, we first swept and dusted the walls properly to remove loose particles and surface dust. This was important because painting over a dusty wall can affect how well the paint bonds with the surface. After cleaning the wall, we primed the sitting room with emulsion. The reason for using emulsion paint first was to cover and review small pinholes and imperfections that were still left on the wall after screening. The body of the emulsion helped fill those tiny areas and gave us a better surface to work with. Once the emulsion dried, we sandpapered the wall again, and this stage was very important. We sandpapered the surface thoroughly until the wall became extremely smooth. Since satin reflects more light than ordinary emulsion paint, any roughness or imperfection on the wall can easily become visible after painting. So we took our time, we checked the walls, we sandpapered again where necessary, and we made sure the surface was ready before applying the final paint. The ceiling had also been rescreeded earlier, so we sandpapered it properly as well. Once both the walls and the ceiling were smooth enough, we started the satin application. For the ceiling, we applied satin white, and as the paint went on, you could immediately see the difference. The ceiling became brighter, smoother, and more refined. We also added a decorative glitter effect to give the ceiling a little extra shine and character. Then we moved to the wall. The sitting room wall were finished in off-white satin, and this was where all preparation started off. The smooth surface, the clean off-white color, the satin reflection, the sharp white ceiling, everything started coming together beautifully. At Deep Painting, this is why we always say that a good finish starts long before the final coat of paint. The sanding, the priming, the correction, the preparation all contribute to the final result. And once the satin was fully applied, the sitting room had completely changed. It was cleaner, brighter, smoother, and more elegant. The main painting was now complete, but there was still one final design element left to add to the sitting room. That is the wallpaper feature wall. With the main painting completed, the next stage was to add the final design details to the sitting room. For the television area, we decided to create a feature wall using wallpaper. This part of the wall was going to serve as the focal point of the sitting room, so the wallpaper had to complement the off-white satin finish already on the surrounding walls. We carefully prepared the section, measured the wallpaper, aligned the pattern, and fixed it properly to the wall. As the wallpaper started going up, the sitting room took a completely different look. The feature wall added more character to the space and helped define the area where the television would eventually be mounted. Once the wallpaper installation was completed, we moved into the final finishing stage. We checked the painting surrounding again. We corrected any small areas that needed touch-up. We checked the edges around the doors, the windows, sockets, switches, lights, and other fittings. Then we carefully started removing the masking tape that had protected those areas throughout the painting process. And this is always one of the most satisfying part of the job. As the masking tape comes off, the clean lines and sharp edges began to show properly. The socket remained neat, the lights remained clean, the windows and doors properly defined, and the finishing starts to look complete. For us at Deep Paintings, these final details matter just as much as the main painting itself, because a professional finish is not only about the color on the wall, it is also about the neatness of the edges and the neatness of the fittings and the attention given to the smallest detail. At this point, the work was practically completed. The bedroom were finished, the passage were finished, the sitting room was finished, the wallpaper feature wall was in place, and all that remained was to take a step back, look at the entire bungalow, and see how far the project had come. And finally, after 5 days of preparation, production, painting, correction, finishing, and detailing, the project was complete. This was the moment to step back and look at the entire transformation, from the 3 bedrooms to the passage, the kitchen, the toilet, the ceilings, the sitting room, the satin finish, the dove grey, the off-white, the color combination, and the wallpaper feature walls. Everything had finally come together. The bedroom now had clean white ceiling and smooth off-white walls. The passage had its own character with the combination of off-white and dove grey. The sitting room came out bright, smooth, and elegant, with the satin white ceiling, off-white satin walls, decorative ceiling effect, and the wallpaper feature wall completing the space. And after removing the masking tape and carrying out the final touch-up, the neatness of the work became even more visible. The edges were clean, the fittings were protected, the color line were sharp, and the overall finishing came out exactly the way we wanted. But beyond seeing the finished work ourselves, one of the best parts of the project was seeing the reaction of the client. The client was happy with the transformation, happy with the neatness of the work, happy with the finishing. And for us at Deep Paintings, that kind of satisfaction is one of the most important part of every project, because at the end of the day, it is not just about putting paint on the wall or on a wall. It is about delivering a result that the client can walk into, look around, and genuinely be pleased with. From buying the raw material to surface preparation, paint production, masking, painting, satin finishing, wallpaper installation, and the final detailing. This three-bedroom bungalow went through a complete transformation, and in just 5 days, this was the final result: clean, sharp, elegant, and professionally finished. This is Deep Paintings, where proper preparation, quality material, attention to details, and neat finishing come together to transform a space. And judging from the client's reaction, this project was a success.
Yeah, the feeling's so right. Oh. The tide is turning, the day is brand new. Got a fire burning, just for me and you. So when you're down now, here I come. Want you to know now where I'm from. I want you to see, yeah, that the good vibes are free. Just be here with me now. Just be here with me now, under this big tree. When the moon is rising and stars fill the sky, there's no compromising the look in your eyes. So when you're down now, here I come. Want you to know now where I'm from.